Look at Grand Central today, the marble, that famous starry ceiling, 700,000 people just gliding through like it's nothing. But 100 years ago, this exact spot was a straight-up war zone. 10,000 guys, 60-foot pits blown into solid rock, and get this, trains were still roaring through while they built around them. No fancy machines like today. They buried an entire rail yard and built a palace on top of it.
Now, I really wish I could have gone back to watch it happen. But since I can't time travel, I used AI to rebuild the whole construction for you, year by year.
To understand the terminal, you have to understand the mess that came before it. On this site sat the old Grand Central Station, a steam-powered hub that funneled every train into Manhattan through a single dark passage called the Park Avenue Tunnel. And that tunnel was a death trap. Steam engines belched out thick black smoke, and inside, it got so dense that drivers could not see the signals ahead of them. Then came the moment that changed everything. On January 8, 1902, an engineer blinded by that smoke drove his commuter train straight into another train stopped ahead of him, and 15 people were killed. The public was furious, and within a week the railroad promised to rip out steam power for good. The very next year, the state banned steam locomotives in Manhattan altogether. Now the railroad had a deadline and a crisis. And that is when one engineer stepped forward with an idea bold enough to reshape the city. His name was William Wilgus, and his plan is the real foundation of everything you are about to see. Here is what made Wilgus a genius. Electric trains, unlike steam ones, give off no smoke, which meant for the first time you could run them deep underground without choking anyone. So he proposed burying the entire rail yard on 2 stacked levels, doubling capacity in the same footprint. And then came the masterstroke. The empty space above those buried tracks could be sold to developers as air rights, and that money would help pay for the whole project. He called it taking wealth from the air. With the vision approved and the firm of Reed and Stem chosen to design it, construction officially began on June 19, 1903, but the crews faced a nightmare first task. The trains could never stop running. They had to tear down and rebuild the busiest rail hub in America without ever switching it off. As the digging got underway, the design itself hit a snag. Railroad heir William K. Vanderbilt was not satisfied with the original plan. So in February 1904, he forced Reed and Stem to team up with a second firm, Warren and Wetmore, led by his flamboyant cousin Whitney Warren. It was a partnership built on friction. Reed and Stem engineered the brilliant layout, including the gentle ramps that replaced staircases, while Warren and Wetmore wrapped it in the grand Beaux-Arts style that makes it look like a palace. They clashed constantly, but out of that tension came the masterpiece. Meanwhile, the real battle was being fought down in the dirt. By 1905, the excavation had grown into one of the largest ever attempted in a city. Workers blasted out around 3 million cubic yards of rock and earth, digging as deep as 10 stories below the street. Because they were tearing into solid bedrock in a packed neighborhood, the heavy blasting could only be done at night so it would not panic the city above. Borrowing techniques from the Panama Canal, crews loaded the debris onto trains, filling more than 400 rail cars a day and shipping it miles up the Hudson. Through all of it, the trains kept rolling and not a single pedestrian was killed. With the great pit carved open, it was time to bring in the steel and the power that would define the modern age. In 1906, the most important technological piece clicked into place. Working with electrical pioneer Frank Sprague, Wilgus rolled out a brand new third rail system, and the first electric trains began running into the city. To protect workers, they sheathed the live rail on 3 sides with wood, a fix that became the industry standard. Meanwhile, the skeleton of the terminal was rising out of the pit, and the numbers were staggering. The underground yard alone swallowed around 30,000 tons of steel, roughly 3 times what it took to build the Eiffel Tower. The railroad was thrilled with its gleaming new electric service, and that pride set up the darkest day of the entire project. In February 1907, the railroad proudly launched electric service all the way to White Plains, and commuters loved it. But the celebration lasted barely a day. On February 16th, an electric express rounded a curve at Woodlawn in the Bronx and flew off the tracks because of a flaw in the new engine design. More than 20 people were killed and 150 injured, with wreckage scattered for over a mile. The press, who still remembered the deadly tunnel crash, savaged the railroad, and even though many believed the disaster was not really his fault, the pressure became too much, and William Wilgus, the mastermind behind the whole terminal, resigned in the middle of his own project. The man was gone, but his blueprint pushed ahead. 1908 was the year the clock ran out. The steam locomotive ban took full effect on July 1st, which meant every train entering Manhattan now had to be electric, no exceptions. Thanks to Wilgus's foresight, the railroad was ready, and the smoke that had darkened the Park Avenue tunnel for decades was gone for good. But building this thing, piece by piece, while keeping the old station running beside it, came at a brutal cost that nearly doubled the price. So the focus turned to the part of the plan that was meant to pay for it all. By 1909, with the buried two-level yard taking shape, Wilgus's air rights idea turned into real money and real buildings. The railroad began planning an entire district on top of the covered tracks, a cluster of luxury hotels, offices, and apartments later, called Terminal City, which would turn the surrounding streets into some of the most valuable real estate on Earth. With the financing falling into place, all eyes turned to clearing away the last ghost of the past. In 1910, the old Grand Central Station, the smoky relic that started this whole story, was finally torn down, with passengers routed through a temporary station nearby so the city never lost its connection. That same year, crews finished a state-of-the-art substation on 50th Street that converted the city's power into the direct current the trains needed. The old world was gone, the power was flowing, and now the actual showpiece could take shape. Through 1911, the terminal building itself climbed into view, and this is where engineering turned into art. Masons clad the structure in pale limestone and granite, while inside, workers raised the soaring vaulted ceilings with interlocking Guastavino tile, the same trick that lets the whispering archways carry a secret clear across the room. The bones of the great main concourse locked into place, setting the stage for the most breathtaking room in New York, and in the final year, they would fill it with stars. In 1912, the finishing touches turned the terminal from a building into a wonder. High above the main concourse, a team of artists working from a design by French painter Paul Helieu covered the vaulted ceiling in a glowing green sky, dotted with 2,500 stars and the constellations of the zodiac, the 60 brightest lit by actual electric bulbs. And here is the quirk people still argue about today. The entire night sky is painted backwards. Some call it a careless mistake, others insist it shows the heavens as God would see them from the outside looking in. Either way, the room was ready, and after nearly a decade of blasting, building, and heartbreak, Grand Central was about to meet the world. At 1 minute past midnight on Sunday, February 2nd, 1913, Grand Central Terminal officially opened, and New York lost its mind over it. Around 150,000 people poured in that first day just to wander through and stare up at the ceiling. After 10 years of work, the final bill came to roughly $80 million, somewhere near $2 billion in today's money. And what they got was the largest train station on the planet, with 44 platforms and 67 tracks, all hidden cleanly underground. There were no grand staircases forcing crowds to climb, just smooth ramps gliding people toward their trains. The smoky, deadly rail yard was gone, and in its place stood a gleaming temple of stone and starlight. But believe it or not, the most incredible part of Grand Central's story was still to come. So the next time you stand under that backward sky, remember what it took to get there. A deadly crash, a deadline, one engineer's impossible idea, 10 years of digging without ever stopping the trains, and a city that refused to let it die. Grand Central started as Manhattan's ugliest scar and became its beating heart.
If you enjoyed this rebuild, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which landmark I should reconstruct next. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one.